Um, okay, so that actually is a good segue because there's something I really wanted to talk to you about on here so that other people could just get exposed to the
Hmm.
idea of it. Because you're talking about opening a new office. And one of the things that you have figured out along the way, this is going to be, so you're talking about opening new office in
Yep.
January
Yep.
and in June. So that's going to be 7 and 8, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 8 locations. Okay. So I don't know when you formed this, but you and I have been talking deeply about this for the last 7 months and trying to put together something that makes sense and is digestible for people. And we're going to just run it as a beta test for master
Yep.
group members and have them go through it. And I think it'll be useful, no doubt, but maybe there's tweaks that we can help and add before we ever put it out there to the real world. But it is basically all about how to understand the size, not just the size of your market, but understand your market, period.
Yeah.
And I mean, we almost named the course "You Don't Know Shit About Your Market." We
Great title.
almost
Still a
did.
great title.
I know we can't, yeah, but we'll try to keep it kosher over here. But I love what I've learned from you there. I'm not a marketer. I never have never pretended to be. Um, I think I'm good at certain aspects of it, but I will never teach it. I will never be a coach for it. That's just not my thing. And you aren't either in
No.
terms of marketing,
No.
but you I'm curious what forced you to develop it, but I guess we should say what it is. You created this way, I mean it's math,
Yeah.
literally math. This way to figure out to the best of your ability what the size of your market is, because it's almost like, one thing that you've talked about extensively with me is that, as an example, um, you'll hear estate planning attorneys say, well, everybody needs an estate plan. That's my market. And it's like,
Right.
that's not your market. Let's get real about this. And you've kind of figured out a way to get real about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would love for you to talk about that. And when did you develop it? I actually don't know that. When did you develop
Sure.
it? At what point along the way?
So post 2018, when I was
Hmm.
kind of finding that and asking those questions about what's next, where do I find that next way of adding value? It was actually towards the fall of 2019 that I was started tackling that question of, well, how do we know when we're winning? How do
Hmm.
we know when we're succeeding? How do we know that, wow, we're doing really good here? Other
Right.
than because the mentality is, well, I just keep pushing. I just keep
Right.
pushing this rock up the hill, and
Mhm.
oh, there's another hill to keep pushing. And so you don't know, and you keep making decisions out of that lack of understanding. And so
Mhm.
I really took some time and started tackling the project. And in its early forms, it doesn't look anything like it did now. But
Mm.
I started researching, I started asking the questions, I started looking for articles, and nobody had tackled the question of what is the average annual size of a legal market, just
Mhm.
in general population
Mm.
terms. Since we're a
Mm.
GP, we handle most of general population issues,
Yeah.
and that wasn't easily answered. And so
Mhm.
what I had to do was do some digging all the way back to 1980, with some Senate testimony from the ABA,
Mm.
bringing it forward with research on poverty levels and understanding of, in general, how many people have a legal need inside of a various poverty levels.
Mhm.
Fast forward from 2019 to now, you've kind of seen the latest edition of how to build a market formula
Mhm.
that I started with, of how to benchmark
Mhm.
success, but has now grown into actually how to, for us to identify where a market has availability and
Mhm.
how much it should be able to do within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And the very first office we fully pulled the trigger on that with was actually October 2020, still mid pandemic. I opened a brand new office
Mhm.
down near Columbus, Ohio,
Mm.
and we did all the benchmarking, we did everything, and I'm happy to say I'm within 90% of my of what I said it would be within by this time this year.
It's
The
fascinating.
guy, and it's a single solo practitioner right now down there, he doesn't have a support team, and he's about 90%. I accept that as a margin of error,
Yeah.
but what it really comes down to is like you said, we have this mentality that everybody needs a will. The will costs this much, and it's just all the money. Just bring
So
all the
that's
money
your
in.
potential.
That's it.
That's your
That's all it.
potential is like, yeah, exactly what you said. You do that math and it's like, well, I should be able to technically, like, if I realized that market, this is what I would make, which is,
And
yeah.
what I found out was this. In reality, technically it's true. Technically,
Yeah.
you can say yes, everybody does need a will. But the reality of it is only about 5.695% of the population on an annual basis meets the criteria that I set out. They
Oh,
have a legal need. They can afford to get that legal need met in a for-profit business,
mm-hmm.
and they're searching. Those
Mm,
were the three primary categories that the research led to, is not just having a need, but being able to afford it,
yes.
and and then in some cases, people don't even look for solutions. They just live with these problems. They
Right.
just live with the issue. And so you
Right.
had to even carve out who's actually looking. And the
Yeah.
low hanging fruit that most of the countries competing over is 5.695% of the population on an annual basis. Now that doesn't
For
include
general.
businesses. Yeah, that doesn't include
Yeah.
businesses and your Boeings and those companies that some of the AmLaw 100 guys are serving, that
Yeah.
have 100% of the need 100% of the time.
Right.
But
Right.
this is for those of us that are even niche practitioners and urban marketplaces,
Yeah.
to me and a rural marketplace. And once we did this, I started asking for peer reviews. I sent it to my CPA because he's a really smart guy to help me kind of. We found that annually we can benchmark whether or not an office that has been open for 5 years is meeting its goals. And when we say we
Mhm.
want to set our next year's goals, are those reasonable?
Yeah.
And actually, what ended up happening this year with the new census data that's coming out is that we've got a couple counties where we've got a serious problem as to whether we can continue to consume
Mm.
another piece of market share in, because we have
Mhm.
competitors, they're eating up market share. And so one of the big questions for a couple of those folks was, where do we expand your practice to next? What
Mhm.
is next for you? Because
Mhm.
when you understand all of this, and this is where you get into the marketing issue that you said, you can actually start seeing where your dollars are going.
Mhm.
Instead of that black box of marketing where you put
Yes.
money in and you hope people come out, you can
Right.
actually start going, this matters. Because
Yeah.
those it's easy to gobble up the early wins there, but every time you gobble up another piece of market share, it becomes exponentially more difficult to get the next one,
Yeah.
because you're in competition, and those things become more expensive at
Yeah.
every step. So yes, what started off as how do we know if we're winning, how do we know if we're succeeding, has grown into a whole way for us to analyze our markets, benchmark
Mhm.
success, know if it's reasonable, if we want to what we want to say, and help understand how to invest in marketing and branding the firm.
Right. No, I love this. I think too, and for those listening that aren't GP, you and I have talked a lot about, and you've done some deep work to basically like, we mapped out the equation that you would use if you were GP. We mapped out
Yep.
the equation that we would use if you were a niche practice. Now, getting those numbers, because this is not some ambiguous thing. I think, what's funny about this is that when people talk about marketing, especially the market, no one expects real numbers because
No.
no one provides them. And you basically didn't take that, you didn't accept that as an answer. You were like, there's a way to get numbers on this. And so we've talked about, even for a niche practice, depending on your niche, there is a way to get the data. You
Yep.
may have to, it may not be easy, but it will be so worth it because then you'll have actual facts and not feelings.
Yep.
So, so like going to the courthouse, going to the city county building, digging at, like, figuring out records on certain things to be able, depending on your practice area. But all it takes is some thought about where you would actually get some of the how are you going to fill in the numbers of the equation that we've mapped out. And the reason I wanted you to talk about this is because when it comes to marketing, you said it so well. It's like a black box. You put a bunch of dollars in and you hope that you get a return on your investment that's going to be induce a smile, right? And
Right,
and
right.
that and that's just, that is not a good way to do it. And marketing firms who even, they may have the client's best interest at heart. So I don't think it's there's any malintent here, but they don't have that information.
No.
So they're doing the best they're doing blind, and they're doing better than we could do on our own, but it's still blind. You don't have numbers about the market size and what you want to capture, what's possible to capture based on like some math. And it's projections, it's not exact science, but like you said, you got within 90%. You
Yeah.
I mean, you had a number, you got to 90% of it within a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So it just, to me, anytime owners can get facts, not feelings, it's just a better way to operate and live. And I think the way that, I mean, you've done a lot of hard work to figure it out. This wasn't something that was handed to you.
No.
I mean, this was digging for real. And now you've used it and you tested it and you're continuing to use it. And now this is part of opening a location for you. I know is that you will have an attorney who works for you come and say like, okay, I did the math. This is what I think we can do if we open up another location. And you're like, okay, great. And you guys can talk about it and whatever. Instead of, I think we should open another location.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
instead of fear around opening another location, like just scratch all the feelings. Should we or should we not? Right. And
Yeah, absolutely. And it does so much more when you get really into it is, hey, when I reach this point in the benchmark, I know it's time to hire somebody
yeah,
because I know my guy in Newark is carrying an admin load that would be a little higher because he's on his own than if I put a legal secretary in there with him,
right, right.
because they can start picking up that admin loan and then
Yeah,
creating more time
yeah.
for him. And so it really gives you not this, I feel like I'm busy mentality. It
Mhm.
gives you this, we can measure capacity for
Yeah,
what it really is.
yeah.
And because let's face it, you try to trust your feelings about when you feel busy, you'll make a bunch of decisions that may not make sense with your money. But if you make
100%.
sense with going, where's my capacity? He's having success, for instance, at 40% billable capacity. He's
Mm,
beating these success metrics, but that also means he's spending 60% of his time either on admin or practice development,
mhm.
which means there's a lot of room for him to grow. And I can measure all of that. And I can say, it's time to start talking about adding to your team.
Yeah.
Because if we could take even 30% or 20% off of your plate, the admin and practice development, and put that back into billables, you're going to continue to
Mhm.
grow and take off. And he came to me from being a solo practitioner, and he paid me a tremendous compliment last Saturday at the retreat. And he says, I had no concept that I could even be this successful a
Mm,
year ago. I never knew this was an option for me. And
yeah.
I was like, it is
Mhm.
so much so.
Yeah, 100%. Gosh. Well, okay. So for any of you who are interested, it's a 5-week class we're doing, and it's only for Mastery Group members right now. So if you're interested, just join Mastery Group. It's worth it. And that starts in October. It
Yep.
should be great. Yeah. So excited. It's a 5-week class. There's 4 classes, but it's spread over 5 weeks because there's like some intense digging you're gonna have to do to get some numbers. And so we gave extra time for that. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is, I would say very specifically, this is for people who are almost like my guy last year, who's like, I have a concept. I think there's maybe more. I think there's another option out there. And if
Mm.
you want to have that opened up to you and you want to explore that, this is that kind of class. We're going to,
Well,
give you the tools to help open that door up a little bit more and see your
yeah.
potential.
Well, also, like that is true, but I think of there's certain members that have a mastery group where they're successful,
Yeah.
but they don't know where they are in terms of saturation or market saturation. So there's fear. I could think of one where there's fear. It's like, I don't know if I can actually grow bigger here. And that is, now that I've met you and I've learned as much as I've learned from you, that's unacceptable. You
Yeah.
don't like, don't operate from that. Like get the knowledge that you need to figure this out. But then there's other people who think that the world is their oyster and they might be wrong. Like, what like the whole thing. I think, they, not that anyone can achieve anything they want to achieve, but if you can figure out that actually in this market, this is about where you're capped. And so now what? Instead of just keep pushing at something because you don't have any data. So I
And
don't know. I think,
we trust our gut improprietely so when we look at competitor influence in the market.
yeah,
And especially in niche markets. Now,
yeah,
GP, it's a little harder for me to do it, but especially in niche markets, there's a way to know exactly how much influence and how much
yes,
control and what market share your competitors have,
yeah,
because it's normally all public record. You just
yeah,
got to go find it.
yeah, yeah. So good. Well, I'm excited about that. That's gonna
Yeah.
be super great. Okay, another question for you, and I know we're getting close to wrapping up.
Yeah.
What's one challenge you're facing now, right now?
Yes.
He
I
didn't have any
had
of these questions ahead of time, by the way. Like, I'm putting him on the spot. I sent them to you like a minute before we started.
no, it's an easy question. Um, I had a very well respected CPA lay out to me this paradigm. When you just start, you've got a number of challenges. When you make your first 100,000, you have to start setting up systems
Mhm,
to accommodate that 100,000. When you hit 200 to 250, you have to upgrade those systems because your volume is doubled and your systems you started with that were convenient then are probably not now. When you hit 500,000, you're upgrading your team and your systems and you're trying to figure out what's next. Then when you double to 1 million, you might have to overhaul everything you're doing in order to accommodate breaking through that $1 million barrier. And when
mhm,
you keep doubling after that, 2, 4, 8, he says you will have to revamp who your team, how they do what they do, the systems that accommodate and help you with where you are. And he says there will be years sometimes that you'll bounce against some of those round numbers, that million, that 500,000, you'll bounce against and you'll be like, why am I not breaking through? We have some big challenges surrounding one of our next barriers.
mm,
And we're in one of those spheres right now where we're bumping up against
mm,
what's breaking through the systems. When we have 300 people call the firm in 1 month, not clients, new matters, returning clients, that's a lot of time, energy, and effort being put into new contacts.
mhm.
That's massive amount of time. And even though we've got that outsource right now, I could be spending six figures and a half
Mhm,
on just that one part of the practice.
mhm,
And so we are encountering challenges right now about our systems. What do we do next? How do we better install filters? And it's a very, again, challenging thing because I spoke to my attorneys about this on Saturday. And I said, attorneys are very good at saying, I know it when I see it. The little red flag waves in their head. They go, I know it when I see it. But they're very bad at equipping other people to
mm,
have those same identifiers, that same sense of what's right. We think it's just innate to us in our heads, but what it really is it's experience and data and knowledge all
mhm,
coming together to let us know. And I told him, I said, to make you guys as effective as possible, we have to pull those signals out of your head
mhm,
and equip everybody else with them.
mhm,
Because right now, they're wasting time getting non-viable clients coming through that we're wanting to help, but we just can't because they're not inside of
mhm,
our viable client profile
mhm,
that can use our services. And they're using time there. And tons of people we're marketing to that are in our viable client profile that we need to tailor
mhm,
our marketing and how to get everybody in and out and how to continue to improve systems. My
mhm,
single biggest challenge right now is how to refine ourselves to break through this next barrier
mhm,
into what is next in this.
mhm,
And I've kind of got the foot to the gas right now. So we can encounter another barrier like this in 2 years. We can
mhm,
encounter another barrier like that sooner. as we continue
Mhm.
to grow and continue to push. But right now, I'm up against one of those systems, teams. The way we
Yeah.
were doing it is no longer sufficient, and we have to overhaul to break through this next barrier as we continue to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think about, so you're gonna have to make some decisions, like, and
Yeah,
that's part of your job right now is making decisions, and that is your job. And
every day, all day.
every day. So how do you think about making that deciding what needs to happen? How do you approach that? Because, and the reason I'm asking this is because most people, they just want to know what someone else is doing that's gone before them and they'll just follow. And I think that's a shame. Like, it doesn't let you use your brain to sift through information and make the right call for your firm. And so I'm just curious, and I know you don't do that. Like,
No.
I know you well enough to know that you have a very specific, I don't know if you would call it a process, but you take your time with decisions that are big, and you
Yep.
make sure that you try to make them as factual as possible, get as much data as possible. And maybe it's napkin math, maybe it's more sophisticated math, but like, what do you, um, how are you going to approach this? How are you going to
Well,
start to weigh this out?
I mean, let's take one small part of it. The
Okay.
300 people calling the firm.
Yeah.
That's a big time investment, big time investment. It takes resources, it takes energy. And so the conversation's now been happening for about 2.5 months.
Mhm.
What's next? How do we equip the teams to be able to help filter for us so that they don't pass through when we can't really help them, and we could instead get them to somebody else who could help them in that scenario, and maximize the time the attorneys have to work with current clients and work with clients that actually fit our viable client profile. And so
Mhm.
the big conversation that's been happening there is, if this costs us $120,000 this year, do we hire 3 people to come in house
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
full time on staff? Because we figured that we would be paying them about 5 hours a day each
Mhm.
to be answering phones, but then we'd add some little bit of capacity in there to maybe help with a little bit of social media marketing, help with a little bit of deed
Mhm.
drafting, help with, anything that goes on with that. And so that conversation is circling around, what does it mean to invest in the external and bring it in house and have that conversation? And so
Mhm.
what I do is I talk to Erica, my executive admin and infrastructure and IT, and say, what will this take? Can our systems and our phone systems even absorb this internally?
Mhm.
And she's doing that analysis. I go to Irene and I say, okay, this is how much we're paying the contractor. If I bring these people in house, I'm paying for sick days, I'm paying for vacation, I'm paying for maternity and paternity leave, I'm paying for Christmases and holidays and
Mhm.
anything
Yeah.
else. And she's doing the math there. I go to Jamie and I'll be like, how hard in this market is it going to be to find 3 new people? Because
Mhm.
hiring right now is not ideal. And
Mhm.
3 people who will stick with us when we train them how to do this.
Mhm.
And then I go to Jordan and I say, okay, what is going to be the impact, positive and negative, of trading 100% uptime we know with the external provider that we have to maybe 95% uptime in
Mm.
house? And I
Mm.
have my team all working on different components, and some of them are harder issues to solve and some of them are pretty simple, and I can
Mhm.
get answers from each of those. Then I go to my practitioners and I'm like, here's my ongoing problem though. If you don't equip this team that I bring in house or the external team with what's going on in your head, I can't filter effectively for you.
Mm.
And that's something, and I come back to, my attorney team is exceptionally smart. And the attorneys listening to this, undoubtedly, your intelligence is not called into question,
Mhm.
but mastery of legal profession means being able to take it out of your head and disseminate it to somebody else.
Mhm.
Being a great legal practitioner is the ability to practice and to see it and to do it. You can be really great and really experienced, but if you have the inability to actually say, I can take that red flag out of my head
Mhm.
and distribute it to somebody else to effectively use it,
Yeah.
That's mastery. And that's
Yeah.
where I'm pushing my team towards. So I know you said, well, how do you address this challenge? How do you go about it? I resource my team. I
Yeah.
understand my shortfalls. And I understand that when I make a move like this, it's not just a systems move, but it's a way that my team thinks about it. In this case, my practitioners, to help them understand, I need that. I need you
Yeah.
to pull that out of your head. I
Yeah.
need you to put it on paper, and I need you
Yeah.
to train this person to see this. And so it's a
Yeah.
multifaceted step, and any one of those things could derail a decision making process.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. It's just so that's a harder path
It
than
is.
to just like ask, like pull a bunch of other people who are doing it different ways. And I don't know there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's just such a disservice if you don't dig for answers that are right for you and your firm, and instead like internally dig,
Yeah,
inside the firm and with the information that you do have and the people that you do have, and et cetera, than to go out to someone else who they probably do have the right solution for them. But that, like, how do you know that that's going to be the right solution for you unless you actually understand all the things that you're working to understand right now? And there's a lot of complexity in what you're talking about, but you have a team of 22 and you have six
yeah,
locations, two more on the way. It's just it. That's the thing about growth. A lot of times the problems become more complex,
they
and
do.
if you don't have the ability, the capacity, the skills to be able to think in those ways when it's small, when you get it just gets harder and harder. The problems get bigger and uglier because you don't know how to address those. So I just think what you're saying about you I really, one thing I really appreciate about you is how much you turn inward. And I don't necessarily mean inward, although you do that too. I mean inward into the firm to cultivate information that you need
Yeah.
and to make your decisions. That is not innate in people. I think because they don't know how to like no, there's no blueprint for how to do that. You really just
No.
have to figure it out. It's like it feels
Well,
like I have this visual of people digging in the dirt for
right.
like a treasure or a bone, and then they might find one every once in a while. But at first it feels hard to uncover the information you need in order to feel good about a decision. But
Well, even
that's
a firm a quarter our size, the
yeah.
thing is it's actually starts at a much simpler step than just going digging for the treasure. It starts understanding this. Every single day, you're creating gigabytes of data.
Mm,
You know, our firm creates, I don't know, terabytes of data
mhm,
every year, that we create documents, emails, notes into our client management systems, all of these things that are going back and forth all the time. The reality of it is, though, is that even if a practitioner is in a place where it's like, wow, Chris has got a lot of team and a lot of information that he can use,
mm,
they're creating that data that they can use every single day.
mm,
The difference is that I've made a mission of capturing it.
mhm,
I made a mission of saying, where is the time going? What is
mm,
happening? Is this a profitable area because we're spending too much time here? It's not making money actually, versus, boy, we need to lean in harder over here because we're getting a lot more bang for our buck. But
mhm,
even to systems, answering the phones, you have to take control of the data and
mhm,
then start sifting it and compiling it into actionable information.
mhm,
And that's why going inside the firm makes so much sense for us, because my team is constantly synthesizing the data into actionable information that we
mhm,
can work off of. And you will never be able to go outside of your firm and look at a competitor and from the outside in go, they're doing this practice area, I should be doing that, because you don't understand the data, the information, and what's going on. They
mhm,
probably don't either. And
mhm,
so when you take the time to actually start gathering, and it's not necessarily intuitive, but you gather the data, you turn it into actionable information, and then you keep reflecting on that. and seeing how it's changed to make your decisions. I mean, I love the fact that you to make me sound really smart, but it's really just grabbing hold of what we have already.
Well,
This mo-
I do think you're smart, but I think you're wise. It's a wisdom that you abide by. There's like it I am
the dude
guessing
abides.
the dude abides. So yeah, to me, I mean, I do think what's crazy is because of the wisdom to like do things that way instead of going out to see what other people are doing and then implement that. Doing things the right way, it sometimes is slower,
Yeah.
but it's more sustainable, it's more accurate, it's right. And so I do think you get smarter because you're applying the wisdom with it. Like you learn and learn and learn and learn. And um, so yeah, I do think you're extremely smart, but I don't think you would be had you not been wise to sort of stay in I don't even know why you did it. Like, I don't know if it just feels right in terms of principle to really stay inside and dig and uncover versus going to ask successful people, friends and colleagues that you have, like, what'd you do? I
What?
don't know.
Yeah. I did it because I wanted to fundamentally understand what it
Understand,
was we were doing.
understand. Yeah.
And I didn't
Yes.
understand. I didn't
Yeah.
understand how we were being successful. I didn't understand when we were being successful, what was working. And
Yeah.
when we were falling flat on our face, I was like, why?
Oh,
Why is this happening? And
because this is coming back full circle to what you just said. When you really deeply understand something, you're getting closer to mastery. And
yes.
I love the way that you said when you have mastery over something, you can take it out of your brain. Okay, and so when you were talking about deeply understanding, to me this is coming back full circle because if you have a deep understanding of the ins and the outs and of your firm and of your market and of your like the things, all the things inside your firm to enable you to make the best educated decision that you can because you understand, that is where you start to get mastery over, like,
Yes.
in my mind that's a meta skill. If you can do that, then you have this understanding. And then you were talking about mastery. When you think of your attorneys or your team, you want them to have mastery so that they can empty it out of their head and distill it down. And if you don't have mastery over something, it's very difficult to do that. It's not. So
But you can't develop mastery too if you're constantly stuck in the doing. And that's
mhm,
where you go even further back to the identity
mhm,
crisis between, are you a practitioner
mhm.
or are you a business leader? And they don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be juxtapositioned against each other,
Mhm,
but you have to go through a mental shift
mhm,
to understand that becoming an owner and a successful business owner
mhm,
requires mastering your business.
mhm.
And if you're constantly stuck in the doing and practice, you're not going to have time to develop mastery.
Right. Yeah. You said before too, it's similar. You think of it like the health protocols as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a big guy. I like to lift heavy things. I'm not going to go running for a marathon. A marathon is not my jam. I've got a screw and
Yeah.
two staples in my right knee from high school football. It's not going to be happening. And I could
Yeah.
look at runners though and go, man, they're killing it. I should be doing what the runners are doing to be healthy.
And if I
But
can't
that's
do what
not
the
the
runners are doing, then I can't be healthy. Like,
exactly. I'm
yeah.
failing and I'm just going to eat Doritos on the couch all night long. But
Right.
it's another thing to go, no, this is me. This is who I am. This is how I am healthy. This is how I reach my health goals. But
Mhm,
it's so much harder to spend that introspection to know how your body works as opposed to watching the keto trends or the CrossFit trends or the marathoning trends or the whatever it might be, and just
mhm,
trying to follow those trends. And for
mhm,
some of us, we'll fall into something good there.
mhm.
But for others, it's like, this isn't working. I'm failing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, being more than a follower of the other industries, being more of than a follower of your competition, that you can respect that
Mhm.
competition, but understand they're not succeeding the way you're going to succeed.
Right. 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 Exactly. 100%. It really is I mean, you're just to me, you're hitting the nail on the head with in terms of being a law firm owner, these are the kinds of this way of thinking is important for long-term success. And for no one's in a you don't need to be in a hurry, but to streamline your way to success instead of trying all these fad diets that do work beautifully for like there are certain people who thrive on a vegan
Yep.
diet. There's certain people who thrive on paleo and keto, just like you mentioned. But it's not that those things aren't good things to be looked at, but you don't if you don't understand, I love the way that you said that. If you don't understand your body and do some digging and figure out and really understand your firm, then you're not going to know what solution probably makes more sense than another. And I just, yeah, that way of thinking will serve you. It's just the gift that'll keep on giving.
Yeah. And I mean,
Otherwise,
it keeps carrying on too, because your firm is stamped with your DNA,
mhm,
your emotional, mental, cultural DNA.
mhm,
And you cannot help it. If you were the founding member of this firm, it cannot escape you.
mhm,
But if you don't treat it like it's you, and you keep insisting that it be stamped with this person over here,
mhm, mhm.
it's not going to work the same way.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Okay, and the last thing I want to hear you talk about, if you're open and willing, I love how you talk about the firm is hooked up like an IV
Yeah.
to people and the mental shift that has to happen, which you've been through. Um, so can you talk about how you think about that?
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't want to get down on the legal industry, because this is an entrepreneurial problem
Totally.
globally with small businesses. Is
100%.
whether you're in consulting or coaching or in the industry, is that entrepreneurs have a vision and a passion that drives them towards creating something, and this
Mhm,
entity, whatever it is, to do whatever it's set out to do. And for lawyers, maybe that's setting up their own firm, and it's
mhm,
that energy and creativity and everything that drives it forward. But instead of setting it up with the idea of an ecosystem, they rush the process because it's so tied to who they are. And this entity they created is literally hooked up to their blood vein in their IV, and it can never have more energy and never be more than the founder was,
mhm,
because it's so tied to the ebbs and flows of that person's energy level, their ability to their skills and abilities, like mine.
mhm,
Not doing finance was not my skill, and my firm was tied to my inadequacies. I
mm,
could not be more than my inadequacies would have let me be.
mhm,
And the the thing is you have to realize, when you set up this firm, this entity, it's separate. It's
mhm,
supposed to take care of you. Now, early
mhm,
on, yes, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and crying, just like with kids. You got to help that kid get to a place where they can walk and talk and start taking care of themselves. But you can't be there today. When my kid went to junior high, you can't be there today for her. You can't be walking through the hallways with her.
mhm,
That's her hoping that you've done well enough by her that she's taking care of herself. But entrepreneurs miss the gap when they're setting up their businesses, and they just keep themselves connected to it. And when it comes to law firms, all of your value, everything that you're giving to this thing, has no value to anybody else if you ever want to transfer it to someone else, because
mhm,
it's all you. And I've had to have two conversations in the last 24 months with firms that I've looked at maybe acquiring. And I've had to go back to these pillars of their communities, these attorneys that have done great things in their communities for decades, and sit down across the table from them and say, I tremendously respect what you've created, but it has zero value apart from you.
mm,
You have not created something valuable. You're generating value day to day, but as soon as you disappear, so does it.
Mhm.
And that is the problem when you are approaching a business and you're setting it up, and the excitement and everything, you tie it literally to your very life force that drives it forward. Not to be uncouth, but as soon as you die, so does it.
Mhm. Yeah.
It doesn't have any valuable, it's not valuable to anybody else
And
out of that moment.
eventually, if you keep that IV in and it gets to the place where like you were talking about your kid, it's like raising a kid. It gets to the place where it can start to do things on its own, but it's still hooked up to you. It sucks the life out of you because it starts to be bigger, but it's not healthy. And it starts to suck the life out of you. It's chaotic. It doesn't have all the systems that it might need to be able to thrive on its own. It's relying on you. And the longer that business goes on, the more life force gets sucked out of you, and people
Absolutely.
become shells of themselves doing this, and they have the best of intentions. No one knows that they're doing this, but that's what's happening. And
Nobody sets out to say, I'm going to spend my life, literally spend it on this thing that's creating it. But it's so counterintuitive and so insidious because it just happens. And it's not a bucket you can ever fill.
yeah.
Your entity will just keep
Oh,
taking and keep
yeah.
going. It is not a, oh, if I give it this much, it'll be okay. No, it's hungry. It will
Hmm.
just keep taking. And but if you don't set it up, and there's ways to set it up in the right way, where all of a sudden you take the thing that's starving and feeding off of you, everything you give it, and now start setting up with systems and teams
Hmm.
and measurements and metrics and KPIs and whatever it is that helps you make it. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, it's taking care of me.
Hmm.
It's now giving me life. It's giving me the ability to go camping on a 3-day weekend. It's giving me the ability to step back and write a book or become a speaker, or I can leave at 3 o'clock and go see my kids game.
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah.
it's giving me the ability because it's taking care of itself. And
Right.
someday, right now, and I say this without any bit of morbidity, if I drive out and I get hit by a school bus, my firm loses zero day-to-day value.
Right.
I am not, it is no longer contingent upon me. And I know you've had a lot of people in your circles that they are their primary producers still, and they're still, their firm would suffer greatly if they were gone. But in the structure of it, the firm actually is taking care of my hopes and dreams, and
Yeah.
not vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. And those people though that are in my community, it's because there's just they're just new, right? It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
they're getting to the place where they're doing all the right things. They're putting one foot in front of the other. They will have a version of what you've created. It'll be their own version. It might not be as big.
Nope.
But it will be the version where they're being taken care of. And many of them are there, but there's a lot of people. And what's funny about that is it's so easy to compare yourself. So I would imagine, there's people listening to this that they're making 100, 200 grand a year listening to you and comparing themselves to you, which is
Oh
not
yeah.
okay. Like
No.
that's you comparing yourself to someone else who's at a different point in the journey. It's not the same thing. So just come back to yourself with the like start digging, start understanding things in your own firm and make incremental progress to be able to pull the IV out. That is it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even when you do start entering a place where you're leading your internal team, I've got one attorney that probably within about 36 months, with some smart investment in her team and growth, and if she's able to mentally adjust from producer to leader, I
Mm.
could probably turn her into a 7-figure practice leader in about 36 months.
Yeah.
I've got one guy who's been a practitioner with me for 4 years. He's killing it. He's doing an amazing job. His market will probably cap him out around $600,000,
Mm.
just
Mm-hmm.
because that's the nature of their practices. And I told them on Saturday, and I called all of these out, what each of their potential was, and I said, and none of you are being judged against the other, because
Yeah.
each of you has your own market, what you're
Right.
doing inside the firm that is essential to who we are. And if you constantly go, that guy has this, or that lady's doing this, you're going to keep missing what your potential is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Oh, so good, Christopher White. Usually I call you Chris. I'm just being
Yes, yeah.
silly. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Is
Absolutely. This is
there
great.
Oh, this is so great. Is there any like where can people find you? I mean, you have your website for your law firm.
We do, and that's equus.law, EQUES.LAW.
Nice. Okay. Is there anywhere else you like to interact with people?
I there we're on the Facebook,
Yeah.
as my elder officers call it in the firm. I've got a little bit of Twitter at,
Yeah.
and my Twitter handle is at J the number 3 and 8 spelled out, EIGHT.
Okay.
But otherwise, the best way to do it is jump on the website, grab my email, and say, "Hey, Chris, I want to chat," and we'll get
Yeah.
connected. That's the
Yeah.
number one best way to do it.
That's great. And for any of you who want to be in a class that we're teaching together, it starts in October. Get in Mastery Group because we're just doing it there. So come and join
Yep.
us. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Melissa.
Bye.